Welcome to your Spiritual Besties podcast. I'm Lauren Ledoux.
And I'm Rashida McCoy. We're here to laugh, cry, learn, and connect with you.
We discuss anything and everything from our everyday lives to the magical, mystical, and woo-woo.
So take a deep breath, grab a cup of tea,
and set an intention to receive, because you deserve it, bestie. Welcome, everybody. Hello, friend.
Hey, friend. How are you?
So we've been talking for a good half hour, fired up about all kinds of things.
All kinds of things.
So I think we're gonna have some.
Like, Lauren, we're gonna put this out there because we need to talk about it, but not yet.
Yeah, all kinds of subjects. We've been talking a lot about like the sacred feminine and sharing ourselves, and we will continue to talk about that over time. Today we're going into a little bit different subject that I'm excited to talk about. And before we get into it, I do want to share with everybody that I have a free quiz on my website of what is your chakra superpower.
And it's so cool. I took it and it was like spot on.
Yeah. Rashida's a heart open honey.
I am. That's totally me.
And I think it's it's important to really tune into what our gifts are so that we can be more in love with our own selves, right? And more of service to the world as well. So if you take that quiz, it will really help you hone in on that. And I'd love to know what your results are. So just go to laurenleduc.com and it will be a pop-up that comes up right away. And I'd love for you to take the quiz. It takes like 5 minutes, but it really will like bring you closer to your gifts and let you know what you can do to elevate your gifts and take them to the next level. So I'm excited. I'm a mystical mama.
Oh,
That
I
was
love that.
that was mine. So yeah, go find out your chakra superpower and let us know what it is. So today, yeah, Rashida and I were talking. We talk about a lot of things, and I'm excited to present this particular subject because it's one of the things like that's been most life-changing for me, and it's something I love talking about. And it's something Rashida doesn't know very much about. So we thought it would be fun to bring it to the table. So today we're talking about kind of introing to some yogic philosophy. And the truth is that most people, at least in the US or in the West, like don't actually know what yoga is. We talk about yoga all the time. We see like we wear yoga pants. Maybe you go to hot yoga or to yoga classes. But yoga is a whole science and philosophical system that has existed for thousands of years in many, many different iterations. And it's just one of my very favorite things in the world. So if you practice yoga, this might be very interesting to you. This might help deepen your practice. If you already know about this stuff, then you might be a philosophy nerd like me and you'll love this conversation. If you don't practice yoga, you might find out through this conversation that you actually do practice yoga. So, a lot of different sides to this conversation of yoga philosophy. Another reason I wanted to bring this up, and Rashida and I have been talking about this, is, our very first episode is what is spirituality? And really, like, the answer is quite loose, right? It's very different for many people. And we are so lucky and blessed, I think, to live in this like global time where we have exposure to many, many different philosophies and practices, and that we have the freedom to decide what works for us individually. It's a very cool thing. What can get lost in that is some sort of like ethical backbone that helps sustain and guide our practices. And by that, I mean like pillars that tether us to eventually the divine and help us have like sustainable long-term practices that help us do so. Things can get really murky and yucky, I think, without some sort of ethical pillars to live by. Also, they can get confusing. So this gives you something to like always draw back to. Yoga is not a religion. It's, like I said, a science and a philosophy that has developed over many thousands of years. Um, but you might consider what we're going to talk about today similar to like the Christian Ten Commandments, for instance. I'll also say that like even if someone practices yoga and studies philosophy, doesn't mean they're always following these principles. So discernment is really important. It's similar to religion, like, people might preach about things, but that doesn't mean they're actually like living their lives that way. Um, so you'll kind of feel what my view of yoga is, and like this really will color in for you how I like see the world really. And while my view on spirituality isn't solely based on yoga, it has been truly like the cornerstone of my spiritual philosophy, if that makes sense. So, you ready to get into it, Rashida?
Yeah, I'm down. I'm ready to like have this conversation because I think when I think of yoga, I just think of yoga pants and like poses. And so I'm really excited to like see what you have to share today. And also too, like when you were just talking about, this introduction to what our conversation was going to be about today, and you were talking about how this philosophy creates like pillars to the divine, it kind of had me thinking of where normally we need like a masculine and feminine aspect of things. And this philosophy is going to like create that masculine container for us to like flow in. So I'm really excited to see how that plays out and how we can apply this to our lives. Like this is great. Let's go.
Okay, awesome. So, like I said, yoga is many thousands of years old, and there are many different texts and belief systems within it. I'm not going to focus on it broadly in that way today. What I'm going to focus in on is the Yoga Sutras. So the Yoga Sutras were written 2000 to 2500 years ago by Patanjali. And Patanjali is sort of a mysterious figure. There are like mythologies around him, but no one really knows exactly who he is, or maybe even if some of the books of the sutras were written by different people.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's really cool. And the reason I'm focusing in on this in particular is because it lays out like the ethical principles of yoga in a really systematic way. But just know that this is only one interpretation of yogic philosophy. Beyond that, the sutras were written like all yogic texts in Sanskrit, which is an old scholarly language that is not used anymore. It's kind of like Latin in that it's like a quote unquote dead language. Um, that being said, there are many, many English interpretations of it. Um, so just know there are a lot of different ways to look at it, and what I'm sharing is my perspective. Um, so just know that it's not the only perspective. Uh, Gosh, I'm like, where do I nerd out next? Sanskrit is really interesting because each each syllable, each word is really, really packed with meaning in a way that is very difficult to translate into English. Um, that's why I don't pronounce it perfectly, but I keep trying and I keep changing based on what I learn. That's why you'll
Mhm.
hear me say like chakra instead of chakra, um, because it specifically sounds a certain way to evoke a specific energy, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. It's a very beautiful and meaningful language. So, what I wanted to get into first is like, what the heck is yoga anyway? Like I said, most people don't actually know what yoga is. There are many interpretations of yoga based on which text you're referencing. But in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says yoga is the mastery of the mind's fluctuations. So, yoga is the mastery of the mind's fluctuations. Like I said, there are many different interpretations of this. My teacher likes to say yoga is I think it's like the non-attachment to the mind's fluctuations, or no, it's non-identification
Mm.
to the mind's fluctuations. So the
So
mind's
like
fluctu
not putting a label on it.
it's well, just not confusing yourself for your thoughts.
Oh,
That
okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my body. I'm not these things that change. That's what yoga is. The next verse is when the mind is steady and calm, we know our true nature. Okay, so in yoga, we talk about chitta vritti, and chitta vritti is like the monkey mind. It's the thoughts, the impressions, the dreams, the daydreaming, all the stuff that's going through the mind all of the time. Yoga is truly harnessing that. Yoga means to yoke. So you can think of like yoking two oxen together so that they can pull a cart. So
Hmm.
yoga is really like disciplining the mind. So when you are able to stop the mind's fluctuations, as some texts say, or maybe just stop identifying them, master them, like this particular text says, um, the mind calms. So you can imagine like a snow globe that's all shaken up. That's the chitta vritti. When the snow settles, what you're left with is yoga, essentially. So when the mind settles or when we stop identifying with it, we realize who we truly are. And who we truly are is that which never changes. There are many words for it. It's the observer. So, what is observing what's happening in the mind or in the
Mm,
body? What is this part of us that's like fully objective? Um, and essentially, it's our spirit, our soul.
yeah.
It's our inner divinity. So, yoga actually provides a path of self-realization, realizing who we truly are, which is this observer, this seer, this soul, according to the Yoga Sutras. And what Patanjali outlines in one of the books of the sutras is an eight-limbed path, essentially to get to samadhi, which is like that state of enlightenment, which is self-realization, which is knowing that you're the seer or observer.
Mm,
Um, the reason I like the sutras is because it's almost like a legal document. It's very like straightforward. It's not very poetic. Um, we might talk about like the Bhagavad Gita in another episode. That's an epic tale. It's poetic. What yoga is revealed in a very like symbolic way, which is also very beautiful. The sutras is very different. Super straightforward. Um, Also the sutras, so we'll talk about the eight-limbed path, but like the sutras also goes into like some pretty out there stuff, like essentially like the cities or the superpowers that can be attained. But then it's kind of like, but don't chase those. That's not really what they're kind of a distraction. And then it goes into like all these different levels of enlightenment. Those two things aren't that relevant to the average like yoga student in
mhm,
2023. They're very interesting and for you and I, like going into our intuition and stuff, it totally lines up with that. But like the eight limb path is super relevant to most people. So what I wanted to talk about today is the first limb. So to put this into perspective, it's this path to enlightenment, and asana, which is the movement of yoga, is just one of the limbs out of eight. So if you're going to a yoga class, you might hit on one limb, you might hit on a few, depending on like who's teaching it. Um, but just know that that's a very small part of yoga. Also, when Patanjali talks about asana in the Yoga Sutras, all he's talking about is a comfortable seat for meditation. He's talking about like one particular position.
no,
Uh,
so not all of these different poses.
no, no, but those have like expanded out through yogic history, um, especially like the yoga that we practice today or that most people practice today. That was really designed like a little over 100 years ago or around 100 years ago. for young boys so that they could sit in meditation. So it's a way to like get the energy out so that you're able to sit, if
Okay,
that
so
makes
you're
sense.
supposed to do these poses before you go to sit for meditation
Yeah.
to kind of like calm you down and clear your mind.
Yes. Well, especially if you're a young boy who,
Well, yes, yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
but most people, yeah, they have minds that need to be cleared out before they can even like think of sitting down in that way. So anyway, I'm sort of digressing here, but I just want to stress the importance of asana in that, like, is it important? Yes, but there are so many other things. The first two limbs are ethical principles. So that's mostly what I'll be talking about. The third limb is asana, which is again a seat for meditation, but it also has expanded to mean your physical practice. The fourth limb is pranayama, which is
The
use of the
breath.
breath, but
Yeah.
really it's about energy management,
Okay.
prana management. You use your breath in specific ways to achieve a specific result in your energy.
Hmm.
Um, then pratyahara is after that, which is sense withdrawal. It's like going inward. After that, we talk about concentration or dharana. And that is like when you first sit down to meditate and you need a mantra, you need something to concentrate on, like to pull your focus. Then we go into dhyana, which is actual meditation itself. It's like once you are feeling like that oneness, you're in the focus. And after that is samadhi. So you like have fully merged with your point of focus. And the highest point of focus is the divine. So when you merge with the divine, that's when you're in samadhi. That's when you've quote unquote like achieved yoga. Um, but really like they recommend really nailing the ethical principles first before you even want to be in an enlightened state, because again, you need that like the cornerstone. You need to be able to be responsible with what enlightenment can bring too. And really like the yamas and niyamas, which are what we'll talk about, I think just the yamas today. Um, they really like tell us how to be good humans.
Hmm.
Um, so yamas, the first limb, is all about like what pretty much everyone should do to live in a very harmonic or harmonious society and to have harmony within our own selves. The second limb, niyamas, is their ethical principles, but they're specifically for people on the spiritual path. Um, so, want to dive in?
Yeah,
So,
let's go.
um, I know that's been a lot of teaching so far, but when I talk about yoga philosophy, like it means nothing unless we apply it to our lives. So I'm hoping we can just talk about each one and apply it to our own lives today and to society and just see where it goes like we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's
Um,
flow.
yeah, and for anyone at home to like really think about how these principles apply to your own life and how you can maybe I don't want to say edit, but like how can you make some changes perhaps to align even more with these? So again, Yama's limb one, how to be a good human. That's essentially it. The first one is ahimsa, ahimsa. And what ahimsa means is non-harm. So this is number one. This is like what we measure all the other ethical principles against, because sometimes, especially when you get into philosophy, they can seem to like butt heads in a way.
Mhm.
So everything gets measured against like, is this causing harm? So we think about ways that we cause harm to ourselves. We think about way or ahimsa is also nonviolent. So how are we violent toward ourselves? How can we be less violent toward ourselves? Um, what are ways that we're violent toward other people? How can we be less violent toward other people? What are ways we're violent toward our environment? And how can we be less violent toward our environment? So we think about violence, I think, as this I don't know, as like a physical thing, like hurting somebody physically, but we start with our own thoughts. So we're given this opportunity in yoga through like meditation, through like all the different practices to really observe our own thoughts. And I know for me, like most of my life, I have been my biggest bully. And I still catch myself like being this antagonist sometimes, and it's in a way that I would never, ever talk to somebody else. Um, but unfortunately, I think programming over time really like put me in this spot where, man, I'm just like constantly on myself. And before this call, I was telling Rashida about, I had like a goddess ceremony last night from when we recorded this, and I messed up the tech. And I was like so angry with myself for doing that, and for being like less than perfect. And when that came up, I was just like, oh my God, this again? Like,
Oh.
yeah. And for me too, like struggling with an eating disorder for many years, I was harming myself by not eating or by like purging. Um, it's such an important thing to talk about, especially when it comes to like our relationship with ourselves. What does this bring
Mhm.
up for you?
Yeah, it's like I'm sitting here just thinking about one, me being in my adolescence and how I really, really talk to myself. And then also too, like what it's bringing up is I've been starting to shift a little bit, but for some odd reason, and some of this is a bit unresolved still, and I'm working through it, but stepping into certain spaces, being a Black female sometimes brings up why why me? Um, you know, and and for some reason this just keeps coming up for me, especially now. And so that's what is really coming up when you said like this nonviolence towards myself. Like this is who I am. And I love being a Black female. I really do. I was actually talking to my daughter about this. We were talking about the color of our skin and all the things and how we like it. And I truly feel that way. But from a younger age, like that was the conversation in my mind all the time of how I wasn't good enough and how I wasn't worthy enough, and just really talking bad about myself, about something that is just who I am. And so, coming full circle, coming into this, that plays a part sometimes about like a new position I'm taking. Also too, like just my physical appearance sometimes, like I'm still having these things come up, but I do know, like, why not me? What makes anybody else more worthy than me? The universe is presenting these opportunities to me. Why not? So when I think about this, like nonviolent or non-harm towards myself, like, do I still come into contact with it? Absolutely. But I think you're right, Lauren. Like a lot of this has been so ingrained in us from the beginning. And sometimes not, I mean, a lot of times not even from our own parents. Like
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of this thought process is like the things that I would watch on TV and like the type of environment I grew up in. I'm in a predominantly white area. There wasn't a lot of us in my school. And so Black history really wasn't a thing when I was, growing up. Like I'm 37 now. So it's just figuring that out, seeing it for what it is, and recognizing that those thoughts, like those aren't really like they're mine, but they're not me. They're not
Hmm.
mine. Observing that and like really seeing like how I'm just not cutting myself the slack I need. And so
Yeah.
also, yeah, also
Mhm.
too, like that's really deep. Thank you for letting me process that and think about that. But I feel like sometimes we find ourselves coming back to this, like figuring out how to not really give ourselves violence. And a lot of that isn't like that physical pain, like we're not hitting each other, like we're not hitting ourselves or smacking ourselves. It's really like this violence that's like going on in our mind.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And yeah, like whether or not it comes from parents or otherwise, like we live in a culture that is violent. we live in a culture, like especially in the US, where like it is totally fine to show all kinds of violence on television, but you see like
Hmm.
one nipple and people freak
It's a
out.
big fucking deal. Yes. Excuse
Yeah.
my French. Yeah.
No, it's fine. And not only that, like our country was founded on violence, um, you know, initially through genocide, following through with slavery. You know, we live in a violent society. We live in a white supremacist society, in a patriarchal society, in a colonialist society. Like, hell yeah, all the messaging that we receive, I don't want to say all, but much of it is violent. We are steeped in it. It's all around us. And I think like a lot of people think that they are free and they think that all of their decisions are made through free will, when that is not the case. They are made through programming.
Yeah.
You know, it's
And
like,
it's
go ahead.
no, and like when you said that, it was like, yeah, and I don't think until you like really start not so much like observing yourself, but yes, observing yourself and your thoughts, but really like starting to walk like this path. I'm just going to say spirituality. I know we're
Mhm.
talking about yoga, but like just becoming aware of you within this um co-creative space with everybody, like you don't realize that. And you think
Mhm.
all of it is your own. You have that free will. I really like that
Yeah.
thought process.
I also want to add in, I don't want to stray too much for ahimsa, but like within a spiritual space, even anyone can twist anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like as far as like, let's say cognitive dissonance goes, or what's the word? Confirmation bias. Like you can think you're free, but you might just be like conforming your spirituality to patriarchy or to white supremacy even, or you know, be a colonist. There's it's very interesting, I think, which is why this work is so important. Like I
Yeah.
said, what is yoga? It's like stopping identifying with your thoughts because like m much of your thoughts aren't your own. And it's not like getting rid of your thoughts completely because you can't do that, but it's about like reprogramming a lot of times to be closer to the truth. And like for you, like why in the world would you think you're anything like but beautiful and perfect? And I'm sure when you see your daughter, you think that too. But of course, it's because like of the outer violence
Yeah.
and we turn it inward. And a lot of us who are big-hearted, who are sensitive, we have all this violence around us. And instead of lashing out, we lash in because it has to go
Yes,
somewhere.
it does. And it's like we aren't those people to do that. So it's on us
Yes.
ourselves. Mm,
And like that's a story I identify with. I know a lot of the yoga students that I work with this philosophy, like this is a huge light bulb moment for them of like, oh my God, like I even talk about this in my book. Like I thought I was I thought I was a kind person. I thought I was a nonviolent person. I was like vegetarian since age 12 and like giving food to the homeless and shopping at thrift stores, you know, trying to be a good human. And then like I'm so fucking violent toward myself. What is that?
yeah.
And not to like, I'm not beating myself up over that necessarily. It's more just like stepping back and taking a look and realizing that that is still violence. Um, so what this asks us to do, step one, is to like to s- to cease the inner and outer violence. And imagine if we all did that, what would the world be like? But I think it's important to note, like we were talking about, that it doesn't cease by just getting rid of outer violence. It's going inward too.
Yeah. It made me like when you said that, it made me think of, especially when you were talking about, you thought you were a kind person, you were, feeding the homeless and all the things. Like when we don't, everything's energy, right?
Mhm.
So anything that we touch, anything that we do, like has an energetic mark, I feel like. And if we are in this space of, still being violent within ourselves, even if we're doing like the out of work of non-violence, like we still have that energetic signature
Mhm.
on those acts. And in turn, we're like still sending that out into the world, not on purpose, right? How does that land for you? Like just that thought
No,
that I had.
totally. If everything's energy, then like violence is violence.
Mm,
you know? And if I'm being violent toward myself, like whether or not I'm lashing out, like that's still going to have an effect on my daughter, on my family,
yeah.
on my students, because I'm carrying that energy.
Yeah. I feel that. I feel that so much. And it like really makes you think about like what you're doing in your like daily life. Like, you can act and you can like do all the things, but taking a stop, really looking at how you are being within yourself is going to have so much more impact
Hmm.
on your outside world, on you being with your family. Because I can say all day, like, Macy, you're beautiful. Do you believe you're beautiful? But if I don't truly believe that for one myself, how is she going to even like really believe it, right? Because I can say the words,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I think she's beautiful. Of course, like my baby, I think she is flawless. And I want her to feel that way herself about that. But if I'm saying this word energetically, I guess I'm not being truthful if in my mind I still find these flaws or these things that I might be telling myself. So I do like how that correlation is with our internal world and our outer world. Like we really have to get our internal world in order and like really stop hurting ourselves.
Well, for sure. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent because we haven't
Sorry.
like, no, 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 no. Well, I was going to say I don't want to, but I'm going to. Um, in my work with yoga, I've really become very invested in being like trauma aware
Mm,
because this trauma, this violence has a real effect on our systems. What what happens when we're trying to survive can cause ripple effects for generations. Um, so it's so beautiful that we have all this knowledge now and we can incorporate all these things into like a single practice. So I think being trauma aware is definitely a way to practice ahimsa. We won't get into like the nervous system, I don't think, on this episode, but it's important to know, like you're talking about passing things on to your daughter, like if you haven't healed your nervous system, like that is going to be passed on to her, even
yes.
if you're trying not to. Um, and I think of like, uh, I know my mom listens to this sometimes. So first, just want to send you lots of love, Mom. And our lineage of women, like looking beautiful has absolutely been a means of survival.
Yeah.
You know, women uh, have not had the same rights as men for a long, long time. And just recently, in the last few decades, we've been gaining more and more rights, let alone if you're a Black woman or someone of color. And, part of that like beauty for survival thing has been um, like making sure your daughters are beautiful too, right?
Mm-hmm.
The outward appearance has to be good so that you can uh, get a man who will take care
Yeah.
of you because you can't go out and
Yes.
get your own credit card or your own mortgage or, whatever that
It's
might
that
be.
security, that root.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my mother never like picked on my appearance. She was always loving and kind. And like you said, like when you were talking about how you see Maciana, like she has seen me that way, and I'm so grateful for it. Uh, I'm starting to cry.
Oh, go ahead. Process it.
And at the same time, like she didn't show herself that same love and kindness. And unfortunately, and it's not her fault, like that still affected me,
Mm,
because we see our mothers as beautiful.
yes. Yes, we do.
And I'm like, oh my God, if like being in her own body is causing her this much pain, like what am I,
Mm,
Anyway, love you, Mom. And this isn't like a blaming thing, but like I see where it comes from,
yes.
So I think like now that we have this knowledge about trauma, we are tasked with healing ourselves, right? And we talk about this all the time. so that we can like, stop these, continue to stop because my mom's done work too to like stop these cycles, right? And then it's my job to like take that further. Um, whew, wasn't planning on going here today.
And it's okay. It's all welcome. And it's
Yeah,
needed, Lauren. I think it's one part of the work of us processing these things as well and really like reflecting. And we're being vulnerable here so others
yeah,
can as well. I really appreciate you talking about that.
thank you. And it's kind of like when we're moving through these, it's almost like moving through the chakras where they're just dense, in the
Mhm.
beginning, and it's a lot to work through. Um, so I think I'll move to the next one. There are five yamas, and I guess hopefully we'll get through them today. If not, it's okay. We've got countless hours of podcasting in our future.
Yes.
The next is Satya, and Satya means truth, or it means not lying, basically. So being true to your word. And again, we look at this internally, we look at it externally, and it's like, what is the ultimate truth, right? If we go drill down into Satya, is that like of the truth of who we are. It's that self-realization.
Mm.
Um, but when we're talking about it like on a societal level, it's like, can we all just be fucking honest? Like, can we be honest with ourselves? Can we be honest with each other? Um, and what will that do? I'll also say before we get into discussion is like Satya is always measured against ahimsa. So just like walking around and giving your rude opinion is not practicing Satya.
Mm. Because
Um,
you're causing violence to others.
exactly. Giving hard truths, like which could potentially cause some violence, is one thing. But just like
Being an
it,
asshole
yeah,
isn't.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. So some people like claim that they're just living their truth and they're
Being
truly,
real. I'm just
yeah,
being real.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But they're
Hmm.
just being an asshole.
An asshole. Yeah.
So I think the thing with truth that's hard though is like a lot of people don't even know their truths. They don't know themselves well enough to be in that.
I have a question for you, like around this, and
Mhm.
just give me a moment while I process my thoughts. So we're talking about the truth of who we are. Do you think this might be hard for some to accept because they don't realize that just because someone's truth is not your truth, it's not wrong?
Mm. Yeah, that's a whole that's a whole other thing, right?
Yes.
I think in like some measurable ways there can be like an objective truth, but in a lot of others, like we're all humans with our own perception. So
Hmm.
there are as many truths as there are people. What is that?
People, yeah.
9 billion or something like that.
Yes.
Like 9 billion truths running around out there. Or is it eight? I can't remember. It's something out of control.
Right. There's a lot of us here.
But yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think like uh, it's funny. In my book, I associate this particular subject with the throat chakra because it's about speaking your truth. It's about
Mm,
being in integrity. Um, so it's not only being able to like speak your truth, it's being able to hear others, right?
yeah.
And to process it
From a
without
way that's
harm.
not like, I wouldn't necessarily, yeah, I mean, I guess judgment would be the word. I think for me, like a lot of issues that I have had in the past, or just even around politics or the way people think, I honestly, I don't care what you believe.
Mm,
I don't care who you stand by. I don't care what your opinions are. And I'm not saying that I don't care, like to brush it off, meaning I hear you, I see you, and sometimes I might not agree with you, but we can still coexist together. And I
hmm
have no hard feelings around that. And I think that is where, like, this, a lot of this, if we go back to one, the first yama, comes from. Like people can't just let go and realize like it's okay to like not be on the same path, on the same opinion, on the same truth as someone else. And just because that's the case, we don't have to like try to change anyone else, right?
Yeah.
Like Lauren, you have a truth about, whatever it is, and I might not agree, but that's okay. Like
Mhm.
it's not my job, it's not my dharma, it's not my purpose here to like sway you from your truth.
Yeah. Well, here's where it gets tricky though. Because say
So,
like someone's truth. Let's talk about this. Okay. Let's
yeah,
say
okay, let's
someone's
go.
truth is that they truly believe that drag queens reading to children is harmful, right?
Okay.
Or that like I don't know, that we don't need any kind of gun control, even though children are being shot. Their truth and then like maybe the power behind their voice because of their privilege or their position of power, um, their quote unquote truth is affecting people's safety.
But then in essence, they're causing harm.
Yeah. So that's what like it's like where do you draw the line between like my truth and your truth?
Well, I guess it wouldn't the line be like if your truth, okay, this is going to sound weird. If your truth is causing harm, like, is it really true? Like, yes, you might
Mm,
believe that, you might invoke that like power behind it, but if in essence we are supposed to cause no harm to ourselves and others in our environment, then is it really true?
yeah. Yeah, here's another part of this. Like Satya is all about integrity. So
Mm,
are your thoughts, your words, your actions matching up? And I would guess to say that a lot of people who like get on platitudes like that
it's
aren't
they're
they're
not
not in
an
integrity.
integrity. Yes.
Yeah. So their truth isn't really it's not standing on anything. It's manipulation. It's not
Y-
truth.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, I feel that
by the
because
way, I just want to
oh, go
send a
ahead.
lot of love right now to the trans community, to our beloved drag queens out there, to like
Yes.
anyone who is feeling under attack right now. We love you. Please keep doing what you're doing. You are being in your truth
Hmm.
by expressing yourself. And you are doing nothing but spreading love and light in this world. And I'm really sorry that there are people out there who would want to squash it. I'm really fucking sorry.
Yeah,
Um, just going off today.
I know. It's needed. It really is. I mean, and I also feel like we need to have more conversations around this based on something, right? Like it's one thing to just talk about things, but we're talking about, the yamas, yogic principle, but there's so many things behind that. There's so many layers that I think it's needed. So I think we should go however we need to go and talk about whatever we need to talk about
Yeah,
because
and
it's here.
yeah, yeah, that's why this work is perpetually relevant, right?
Mm,
Like it's not some like old philosophy that's just sitting in a book. This is like someone was asking me, a client the other day, like, "Oh, I've learned so much over the last few years. Like, how do I integrate?" And I'm like, "You integrate
mm,
by like being present and making decisions in every moment that are based on like this new calibration that you're at, right? So
yeah,
if you're learning about the yamas, for instance, you're learning about non-harm. You integrate this by making choices in the moment that align with that,
yeah.
right? Integration isn't something that you just like wait to
It just
happen.
happens. Yeah.
It
It's
happens.
work. Like
It
there's still
happens.
work involved. Yeah.
Yeah, integration is like, oh shit, I just had like a really harmful thought about myself. How do I now I can like notice that and rewire it, right? That's
Mm,
integration. Um, and that's how we become in integrity, right? Because like what we're learning, what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing are all in alignment. Um, I think we have an alignment problem in our
Yeah.
society where people preach things that they're not doing. And where
I
none of us are
literally,
perfect,
yes.
like we're gonna fuck up sometimes, but like,
It's how. It's the how and the
yeah.
intent and the intention behind it. I was
Hmm.
literally just like thinking that when you said that we have so many people who have these platforms. I've shared this before with you, Lauren, privately. Like there was someone that I followed that they just did some stupid shit, like said some stupid shit to cause like division in like Christians and non-Christians and whatever. And I just think it's stupid. If you say that you're here to help the world, that you are Christian, you're sending love. Why would you do things to cause a division? Like that is you acting out of integrity of who you say you are.
Yeah,
And
preach. You're supposed to
and
be loving. That's what
you're
Jesus told you
supposed
to
to be
do.
loving. And this, right, and this isn't to harp on like Christianity or anything like that,
Mhm.
but just how we can apply this to anything. Like we have so many people. I had a friend who runs a center, and she said, you would be surprised at the teachers that come in that you are just so excited to see and meet, and they're fucking assholes.
Yep. Yeah,
And it's
this is
like,
not any particular religion either. This is like spiritual teachers.
this is just, yeah,
Ego.
this
It's
is,
ego.
yeah. And it's one of those things too. We wonder why we live in a society that is out of alignment, out of integrity, because we have people that we look up to. One, let me just say this, like, yes, we have mentors and they should be mentors. They should not be your gods. They should not be people that you are like worshiping one because they are still human and they still have a human path. But we look up to these people and give them more power than we should. And we wonder why we are out of alignment because their energy, not all of them, right? But a lot of them, we're soaking in their energy. And if they're not in alignment, how can we be in alignment? Because we're trying to mirror
Yeah.
that. That's why this is like such a personal journey, I think,
Hmm. Well, and it
right?
takes an incredible amount of discernment. And to
Mm,
be discerning, you have to step back from the programming.
mm.
So it's really,
And be uncomfortable with it. I think
yeah,
really
yeah.
stepping back out of programming and this conditioning is the most fucking uncomfortable thing ever. Like Lauren, when I decided to like step on this path and like really dive in, I had the most like visceral reaction of like, am I just making this shit up? Like, what if this is the wrong thing for me? What is this like a wrong lifestyle? What am I even getting myself into? Like, why does this in my body? Why does this feel so fucking hard?
Mm,
But I think that's where the work comes in. And I
yeah.
think this is what people, the society, the conditioning, that's what they want you to feel so that you don't step out of it. And this is like an air quote they, right? I can't like
Hmm.
pinpoint one specific person, but this is how all these systems come into place. And I also feel like when people are like, oh, the man, this is what the man wants, like the man is like this system. It's like not
Yeah.
one particular person. So yeah, sorry, I just like went off there, but
No
I'm
need to
not
be
sorry.
sorry.
I'm not sorry, right? I'm
Hey, if
not
it's in
sorry.
integrity with your energy right now, you go for it. I will move us along to the next,
Yeah.
though. Um, the next is Asteya, which means non-stealing. So I'll recap. We've done non-harm, uh, non-lying or truth-telling, and now it's non-stealing. And this one's really interesting because I think we only tend to think of stealing in one way, and that's like physical
Possession.
things or money, but you can steal people's time.
Mm.
For instance, when I was a new yoga teacher, baby yoga teacher 10 years ago, I was
Baby
teaching it.
teacher.
Yeah, little baby teacher. I was teaching at a studio and I would consistently go like 5 or 10 minutes over because like I was so excited about teaching. I just wanted to fit like three more things in. And the studio owner who taught the class after me, she was like, like you need to end your class on time and consider that this is stealing time. And it just hit me. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know, like I didn't think of it that way. Um, Stealing is like so against my ethics, but like holy shit, you're right.
Mm. Yeah, I feel that. That was me too in the beginning as a massage therapist. Um, and even when I started doing it on my own, like now I'm a mobile therapist, so I go to people's homes or places, and I would say I would give this amount, but I just felt like they needed so much more work. And so again, I was consistently going over like 10, 15 minutes. And like in the moment, like I may have said something to them or not, but because I was so ingrained in like, oh, this feels good for them right now, like they need this, they want this, I didn't think that I was taking that 10, 15 minutes away from them to go do something else that they
Mm,
may have wanted, even though they enjoyed the extra time. Like I wasn't putting them in like consideration. I was
mm,
taking that, even that option away from them, right? What if that woman that I worked on needed like that 10, 15-minute break before the kids came home off the bus and she didn't get
mm.
it and she had to go right into the next thing because, I decided to give her extra time. So I feel that. What else it's stealing people's energy too, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah. Yeah, stealing energy. Yeah, I was just thinking, so this verse is um non-stealing what is it? Non-stealing creates abundance and prosperity. So people steal because they feel deprived of something. So maybe they're feeling deprived of their own energy, so they take it from somebody else. Um, they're feeling deprived of something and they feel they deserve it. So they right
mm,
the wrong by stealing.
mhm.
Um, but that comes from this belief in scarcity.
Yes.
And we come from a culture that loves to like make us believe in scarcity, right?
Hmm.
And not
Oh,
just
we
like,
can go into that too, but
yeah.
yes.
And yes, there could be a scarcity of resources, whether or not it comes from like an actual scarcity. Maybe it comes from like somebody owning a water system or something like that, which is messed up in its own right. Um,
Can I say something real quick?
yeah, yeah.
It reminds me of when we had COVID, right? And
Mhm.
we didn't have freaking toilet paper.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the toilet paper because people were being so stupid and like like buying all this fucking toilet paper that they didn't need. So
Yes.
yes, it like made it seem like we didn't have, but anyway, sorry. I
Yeah.
just a thought
Well,
that
and I
came
think
through.
that's important to say because even though like technically they were purchasing the toilet paper, they're still really stealing that from other people
Mm-hmm.
by hoarding. And we'll
By
actually get to
hoarding,
that.
yes.
Hoarding is one of them too.
Oh, dang. Okay. Well, go back to what you were saying so we could get to this other part. This
No,
is so juicy. Like, who knew?
right? Well, this is why I wanted to talk about it because it's so rich and we can talk about these subjects forever, really, and keep having and they're relevant, right? There's always
Hmm.
a new situation coming up. Um, yeah, well, on an energetic level, when we release scarcity and feelings of deprivation, that's what opens us to abundance. We see like there is abundance in nature, there is abundance in divine source energy, there's abundance in pranayama or energy. It's all about like tapping into it.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
everything else will follow behind that. I will say, like, the biggest change for me was like watching what I said. Like, for instance, growing up, my mom would say, we don't have money for that. And honestly, like, we may or may not have. She just didn't want to buy it. But her saying that all the time created this narrative in my head that we don't have. And so coming into an adulthood, it was really hard to like break out of that narrative of not having or not having enough, right? Even when my life was so abundant, I couldn't see that. I could just see like in this particular way that we didn't have enough or I didn't have enough. I literally I remember feeling this, bringing that over into my adulthood and really having to like change the narrative and seeing like I have so much abundance everywhere else, like it's a non-issue.
Yeah, I'll get into like even the like Robin Hood mentality, right? Like we steal from the rich and give to the poor. Like I think there's such good intention there. And at the same time, it's still stealing, it's still causing some harm.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like there has to be some very, very large systemic change to get to the point where that doesn't feel necessary for people.
Right.
Because there
We're like,
is
it's
like,
like in a cycle. It's a
oh,
cycle.
absolutely. And there's this huge disparity of wealth, right, in the world and in our country. And a lot of the people at the top aren't getting there by perfectly ethical means.
Mm,
And there are a lot of very, very wealthy people, wealthy corporations that get a lot of unfair advantages that like just regular folks don't get.
mm-hmm.
So it causes those feelings of scarcity, right? So unfortunately, I think there's going to have to be some like major societal change to make people like see, feel, and know that they don't have to steal. But in the meantime, when it comes to time, when it comes to energy, I think those are things we can work on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think like notice too when someone is stealing your time and energy and call it out. Like if you're expected to work like way beyond your hours or what you're getting paid for, like they're stealing your time and energy. They being like your employer.
Yes. I'm laughing because there's this it was like a TikTok or an Instagram, I can't remember what it was. And it's this woman who acts like she's an employee and she's like, "Oh, are you asking me to like stay after and work and not clock in? Oh no, I'm not going to do that." And she like goes to HR and like I guess the person didn't realize that that's what they were literally asking her to work for free. So,
Mhm.
yeah, calling people out and like really in a loving, kind, compassionate way, right? We don't have to be assholes about it, but it's how like that change is going to happen. Not being afraid, right?
Mhm.
Especially in like the corporate setting as
But
well.
even if you work for yourself, like this is some of what we were talking about with Ellie on the Love and Money episode, like as as nurturers and spiritual service providers, a lot of us are very, very giving and we're going to give like way beyond what we're receiving. Um,
Mm,
so something I tell, here's like an example that's pretty easy. And I'm sorry if you feel called out by this, not you personally, Rashida, but anyone listening. Um, there are certain like yoga students who love staying a long time after class and they want to like pick the teacher's brain and maybe ask about like individual um, circumstances that they have, et cetera, et cetera. And what I advise like the teachers I'm training to do is like, because we want to give, we want to listen. Oh, and people will do this like in DMs too. Uh,
mm,
it gets a little out of control. Is to like set the boundary and be like, wow, I could really help you with this. Why don't we set up a private yoga session? Because that person deserves to be paid for their time and energy and expertise, you know?
absolutely.
And like by allowing that, are you stealing from yourself? Like as a service
Yeah,
provider,
absolutely. By
are you?
sitting there, hanging out, answering their questions because you want to give, you want them to feel heard and seen, but also too, you're stealing from yourself. And let's talk about if you have a family,
Mhm.
you coming home late 30 minutes, that's time away from your kids, time away from your partner, your dog. Like, not only are you stealing from yourself, you're stealing from the people that you care about as well.
Exactly. So I feel
Because
like
all
that's,
because you can't one put that boundary up, right?
mhm.
Or even feel the need like to ask for that. Because I know too, like sometimes for me, that's a thing. I still have a hard time asking because I do want to give and I want to give so much. I actually had a client that called me out last week about that.
Oh,
He
that's
did.
that's kind.
He said, "See, I told you not to do that." And I'm like, "Oh, he's so right." But that's the thing though. Like really being a mirror for other people. He's like, "I listened to that Ellie." He did. He called me out. He's like, "I listened to that Ellie show. Don't do that." And I'm like,
I
"Okay.
love it.
Yes, yes." So you are absolutely correct. I think we can really like dive into that part, but I'm interested to hear about the next one.
Well, it's actually a really good segue into the next one, which is called brahmacharya. And brahmacharya,
Brahmacharya.
yeah, brahmacharya, there are different ways to think about this. So at its most extreme, it means being celibate.
Okay.
What we typically talk about it, though, now, like in a more modern way and maybe a more truthful way too, is austerity or like energy management.
Go into that, Lauren. What do you mean by that?
So I'll talk about our last, what we were just talking about, for instance, like by putting all your energy toward your client in a way that is like over the top and beyond what you're receiving, um, you're not going to have as much to give to your family, for
Mm,
instance. And like,
hmm.
yes, energy is limitless in a way, but like as humans living in bodies, we do only have so much time and energy.
Yes.
Um, so it's really about like priorities and living in integrity with your priorities. Also about being really clear about what gives you energy, what takes it away. It's also about shoring up your own energy so that it's not leaky. And what I mean by that is a few different things. So, say somebody has a lot of sexual energy, for instance,
Hmm.
and they're not managing it properly, they're going to like put it on other people without their consent, if that makes sense. And since we're talking
Yes.
about yoga here, let's think of like maybe a yoga teacher who's like inappropriate with students.
Mm.
Even if they don't think about it or they're not trying to be, it's because they're not managing their energy and channeling it properly.
And so it's just coming out. It's leaking out into what they're normally doing.
Yes. Or let's say, and I'm not saying that it's bad to be anxious, like we all get anxious, but if you're putting your anxiety on others all the time, think about like, I don't know, a mother or something like that who's like constantly anxious and it like their kids are going to feel that.
Mm.
So you're not managing your energy. The actual verse says, strength and vitality come to those who use their energy for the greatest good. So it's also like, what are you channeling your energy into? Which really aligns with like the Dharma that we talk about, right?
Right.
Like, are you channeling your energy into the life you want to create and the world you want to create? Or are you letting other factors decide what your energy goes into?
Are you putting your energy into other people instead of yourself?
Hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily mean, like, to that point, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're meant to quit a job and start your own thing because that's not what Dharma is, right? You
Hmm.
can be you can work for somebody and still be living your Dharma all at the same time. It's just how you're managing that aspect of your energy and time. And if you're meant to like be working for this particular company, you're in alignment,
Hmm.
right? Yeah. I
Yeah,
like that. Do you mind saying that phrase one more time?
yeah, and actually I was going to break down the word. So it's brahmacharya. Brahma means like God
Mm,
or the divine, and charya means chariot. So it actually means like letting the divine lead and guide. So that would be like following your dharma, right? Following your highest path and making sure that your energy is aligned with that. Um, the reason it is kind of entangled with celibacy, I suppose, is because um, there was like a priestly caste that practiced this. I think they were called the Brahmas, and
mm,
celibacy was part of it. And the reason behind that is like, and priests do the same thing too. Um, it's like if you're managing your sexuality or even like denying it completely, then you have that like really potent sexual energy to channel toward your relationship with the divine or to like transmute
mm.
into your relationship with the divine. Same with like nuns. But, and this is a big but, we've really like seen how that can become
An
very
issue, a
messy.
problem.
Absolutely.
Yes. People don't
Absolutely.
know those managing techniques and aren't possibly doing it to the best of their ability. Maybe weren't taught,
Hmm.
maybe don't really care to and want to use their position of power as a way to anyway, I can go on. Yep, we can definitely go down a rabbit hole on that one. But I do see that.
Yeah.
And honestly, even like your thoughts, like being observant of your thoughts, what are you thinking about? Right? What are you
Hmm.
inputting? Um,
So I want to add with the like boundaries is a big part of this one and energy management. So Rish, you and I have been talking about this lately, like as we're diving more into our intuition and like our clairsenses, we are finding
yes.
the need to like really um, shore up our boundaries in an energetic way. And this is like why I've been diving more into this like systemized intuitive work, uh, was because like for so long, I've gotten better over the years, but I'm getting a lot better now. Like I didn't know what was mine and what was other people's. Like when I was feeling an emotion, um, I always was just like, what is wrong with me? Like, why do I feel this way right now? Like I'm introspective. There's no reason for this emotion to come
Mhm.
up. And sometimes things come up for seemingly no reason. We might be like tapping into the energy of something, or maybe it's in our bodies and we're releasing it. But that wasn't the case. Like it would be other people's stuff that I was carrying with me all the time. So like when we're going to energy read someone, for instance, we like energetically cleanse. Like it's almost like taking a shower, cleansing your
Mhm.
energy. And then we like put a bubble around ourselves. And then when we're done, we cleanse again. And that bubble is like so, so important. So I would say that's practicing brahmacharya as well, like really making sure that we're calling in our own energy and not carrying other people's stuff around with us all the time in an unnecessary way.
Yeah, I totally feel that. And to your point, I feel like if anyone does start to dive into like you're feeling called to dive into intuition work, like this piece, don't just brush it off. It's so
Mhm.
important. And also like become very aware of the thoughts again, that observer part I think is so important too, because when we can be that observer in our mind, we can see where we might have holes or openings for other people's energy to come in. I told you, Lauren, that I had that experience when I had a massage I went to, and I just had these thoughts that were like just totally not me. And I've never really had that happen in a way until I started doing this intuition work. So the protection piece really, really, really makes sense.
Absolutely. So yeah, and this also makes me think, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but one of my colleagues, she owned a studio here in Kansas City, Sarah Kuchera, she has written a couple books on Ayurveda. And one of the really cool illustrations she has is of the prana piggy bank.
Mhm.
So
I think you might have told me
did
that. I'm not sure if you,
okay.
I don't know if it was on the podcast to share. I think it's really
And
cute.
I should bring her on too. She'd be really fun to interview. But she talks about like really writing down like what in my life gives me energy and like assigning a value to it even and what takes away the energy and like making sure that you are not totally depleting yourself
Mhm.
and that you're finding some balance there with your energy. So
Can I
yeah, please.
No, I was just gonna say, can I share what's like coming through for me right now?
Yeah.
Like in this conversation, we've been like really talking about like the work, right? And the work that we
Hmm.
have to do. And we, kind of hit on like societies and structures and institutions and different things like that. I feel like sometimes um, we are taught by going in, thinking of ourselves, working on ourselves as kind of selfish. One, it is not. But I
Hmm.
also feel like that stigma has come up because these institutions, societies, these people, whatever, they do not want us to do this work. They do
Mm.
not want us to work on ourselves. And when we start to work on ourselves, we start to realize what is not ours, right? But that's when we do become free. We have that free will. And in a society or systems or just even a world right now where people want to keep control over the masses, it's really scary for people to want to have that free
Hmm.
will. So this is the work and it's hard, but in any of this, right? Like you just said, she said to do your piggy bank. These little practices and these little moments like are so important because this is the work that you're putting in. When people talk about the work, it's really tuning into who you want to be, the type of life you want to live, and getting so crystal clear on these things so you know how to spend your energy and your time and your money and who you want to follow and who you want to let go. I mean, it's just so important. So that just came through. I felt like I needed to say that.
I love it. Well, these are keys to freedom. So samadhi, like which is the end result is freedom. It's
Mm,
freedom from like our earthly tethers even. And yeah, I think that's such a great point. I always want to tell people, I was saying this in my goddess circle last night, like by doing this, by like going inward, by being present, by being introspective, by like taking shit apart and deprogramming, it is a radical act in a world that
yeah.
does not want us doing this.
Yes.
I'll also add, not even like on the other hand, but on the same hand, sometimes people who go into this introspective work get very tied up in their own ego.
Mm,
Um, and or they're constantly learning. Maybe they're doing like ayahuasca ceremony after ayahuasca ceremony, or course after course, or seeing psychic after psychic, and they don't integrate the work. And if they're not integrating the work, meaning what we were talking about earlier, being present in your daily life and making decisions that align with who you are, what you've learned, what you believe, uh, then you're just kind of like stuck in this navel gazing space where you're not really doing any good in the world.
and I also feel like that's how people can, I get the word it's coming to mind is like soapboxes or just platforms. If you're always doing, what you shared, Lauren, I feel like, and not integrating, I feel like when you do begin to share or you do begin to speak, it has no like true meaning.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the person like speaking in platitudes and not being real.
Mm, like mimicking, right? Almost like not really, it's not
No, it's
even like
like,
the authentic piece, right? Like it's not
yeah,
true.
no, it's projecting an image of yourself that doesn't match what's inside, right? We
Mm,
all do it sometimes. Like I have lipstick on today, right?
right.
Um, like I've said before, we're all born naked and the rest is drag, but like are you getting up on a stage and telling people how to live when you're not living that way?
Mm.
Okay,
Or even taking the time to like introspect to even see that you're not. Because honestly, too, if
totally.
like you really think about it, I feel like some of these people really think that they are living in an alignment space, and they haven't maybe taken that time out to like see. Because we can be aligned. I feel like we can come into alignment, but it's that integrating piece that you were talking about. Like we have to consistently like do this
Hmm.
thing and observe and see and work on ourselves, not to like say you'll never reach this like state, right?
Hmm.
But I think that's part of the work too of being human
Oh
is
yeah,
is is reaching for this state,
I
right?
think so. And I know we're kind of skipping around, but I did want to go into samadhi a little bit in that, like, are there people who live in a constant state of that? I mean, maybe, and probably there have been billions of people who've lived lives on this earth. Like, sure, sure. Is that most people? No. Is that
Mm,
most people who are doing this work? Absolutely not, because we're human.
mm,
There's always going to be messiness in being human. And this work also, I know we're talking about being in integrity and stuff. We're not going to do it perfectly.
And we shouldn't say that we are either, right?
No,
Like,
exactly.
mhm,
Exactly. What I will say is like I have had moments of enlightenment. I've had moments of samadhi, and those are when I'm remembering who I truly am, and they fuel
mhm.
everything else. Um, am I going to live in that state perpetually? Probably not. Not in this lifetime. I've got a lot of work to do.
And outside factors, like when you even you thinking about like being a mom, like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you can, you said samadhi. Is that how you
Mm-hmm.
say it?
Mm-hmm.
You can reach that in areas, and that's actually something to look forward to as we like dig in on ourselves. But when I think about the kiddos that I have, like my mind is constantly like on them, right? And all the different factors that I'm like trying to keep together, for the family unit.
Mm-hmm.
But getting those glimpses, having that time to myself, doing that work, I mean, it's just something really beautiful to look forward to and to also pass on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'll add too, like, because man, energy management and being a mom and a working mom, like, woof, that's that's not an easy thing to do. It's a big ask. Like this work, yeah, it's not meant to be done perfectly. Let me also digress for a second. There's an approach to how you practice yoga, which again, yoga is knowing who you truly are, not separating from your mind, but just seeing it for what it is, knowing that you're a soul. And it's practice and acceptance. So all of this is a practice. That means
Mm,
that we keep trying
yeah.
every single day, but there's no end goal really. It's about showing up and trying our best and failing at times, but then keep trying after that. And then there's the acceptance piece. So the practice is the action, the acceptance is the surrender. Whatever results from that is what results. We surrender to the present moment. Um, and we're in this constant dance of the practice and the surrender. And it's this very beautiful thing. So yeah, it's not perfection. But if you are trying, you are practicing yoga. There's I try to do Sahar Rose's yogic path journal. Well, I
Hmm.
don't do it every day, but sometimes I incorporate it into my spiritual practice, my sadhana. And there's a prompt every day that says, I love myself because, and there are so many days that I just write because I'm trying.
Man,
Because
I
I'm
love
trying.
that.
And that's
Yeah.
enough.
And it should be enough.
Yeah. Um, because I'm sure we've all had moments in our life that are very unconscious where we're not really trying, right? But I know every day I'm showing up and I'm trying. And like, if I do something imperfectly or something that deserves to get called out, like, okay,
Mm.
I'm going to keep showing up and trying. And I will redirect and I will like change my mind or beliefs based on this new information or my behaviors. But I'm freaking trying every single
And I,
day.
and that's the thing too, Lauren. I feel like before this shift, perfection was what was sought after,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially in certain spaces, jobs, roles, whatever the case may be. And when you weren't perfect, um, or you were maybe were called out of not being perfect, you have this like resistance, this tendency maybe to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the exact opposite, I think, of what we're talking about. One, perfection is not the goal. Trying your best, integrating, living the life, stepping into your purpose is the goal. And however that shows up in all the messy ways, right? And then, two, when you get that feedback or that course correction, it's not to retreat, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like that also, too, was like that resistance, that work, that pushing the edge of the bubble is to not retreat, is to like really step into that, lean into that, and still show up like each and every day, even if it's hard,
Yeah.
because one day it'll be a little bit easier.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to, before we get into the last one, just talk about how enriching diving into this work is and how, again, radical it is. Um, part of the messaging that we receive being a human in 2023 or on this earth at this time is like from marketing. And
Mm-hmm.
what people have tapped into is that like we constantly feel like we have a hole in ourselves that needs to be filled
Mm.
to attain happiness, to attain perfection. All you have to do is buy this one thing to get there.
And you'll be fixed. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And there are so many like sophisticated tactics to get people into that space of lack, um, and into that space of like constantly seeking and not feeling enough. Um, and again, we have free will, but it can be very, very marred by this programming. But this work really gives us the opportunity to know, like, especially when we come to the practice and acceptance, that like showing up's enough. I can accept how things are. I can keep trying, and I'm whole anyway.
Mm.
Because even if I don't feel it all the time, even if I'm not in samadhi, I know that I am source, I am spirit, and how could I not be whole?
Yes, bringing us just right back to where it begins and what it is.
Mhm. Let's move to the last yama,
Yeah,
which is a parigraha,
aparigraha.
non-graha. Yes, a parigraha, which means non-hoarding or non-greed. And if you flip that, it's being generous. So this is, again, these are for how to be a good human. How like society would function best is if we all followed these individually and communally, systemically. So what if everyone was generous? So we talk about managing your energy, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So that has to like be kept in mind, right? Like you're being super generous with your client and he's like, okay, let's pull back on this a little bit. Um, because it has to be measured against the other yamas, right?
Right.
Ahimsa, Satya. You kind of measure it all against the previous. Um, yeah, so this is non-greed. And I think, yeah, greed comes from the belief in scarcity. Because if there's only a certain amount of money, if there's only a certain amount of energy, if there's only a certain amount of food, if there's only a certain amount of this or that, then I must keep it all because that will keep me safe. But what if we lived in a different way?
Mm-hmm.
The verse actually says, when we don't want for what we don't have, we understand our true purpose. When we don't want what we don't have, we understand our true purpose.
That's deep.
Yeah, it all is.
But also too, when you think about like in terms of like hoarding, right?
Mm,
And just the concept behind just like having all these things and holding on to it and not, sharing or giving or being generous. Not only are we occupying our space, we're occupying our minds with the want to have more, to think we need more. And in turn, we're like occupying that energy and once again, that energetic signature, giving it off. So I'm going to share something. In my family, and also Daniel too. Daniel actually, he doesn't mind me saying this. He grew up in a house that was like a bit hoardy, I should say, meaning like the state had to come out or the county had to come out to like get that taken care of because it wasn't good for the him and his brother being there, right? Um, and he shares that openly. And even though it's not an extreme, in my family too, I can see certain family members holding on to things, clothes that they will never fit into, buying items that they don't need in this particular moment. What that does is energetically takes away from where you can be spending one, your physical wealth. Maybe there was a different place where you could be putting that, but also holding on to all this stuff. You are constantly thinking, you are constantly being reminded of having these things that you're not even using, that you don't even need. And in turn, if you are constantly thinking about all of these things that you don't even need, you might need it one day. One, you're not being present because you're thinking about this future thing. You're not practicing presence. Um, then like if you're not able to like really get that clarity around your life if you're being occupied by all of this extra stuff, all of this weight. And so I can see how it is like not allowing you to really focus on your purpose or even focus on the fact that you don't need it, right? Because you are constantly bringing things in. Like there's just constant input. It's just like nowadays, right? Like our phones. I love my phone. I can't like survive without, I could physically survive without it, but like stepping into like business and stuff like that, I need the calendars. I need all the things. I also input all of these things. Like I even set a timer on my Instagram now because I find myself on it, or I had found myself on it scrolling one and good things too. I try to have a really good feed, not junk, but also too like there's still marketing on there. Like there are things that are constantly flashing in my face of do I need that? And when I was home with Macy, like even before I left my job, I was on maternity leave. I was buying all this crap that I didn't need because I thought I needed it because I was having that input. So anyway, like I can see that, like, and not even focusing on the Instagram or the Facebook or these ads. Like, there are so many ways in which we can feel like we need things and we actually don't. And taking away like that option or limiting that input will like free up that space to actually have energy to put into something else, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And this speaks again to like that feeling of like hunger or the hole inside of you that needs to be filled. That's what like
Hmm.
hoarding, grasping, greed is there for, right? But that is not what will fill that hole. What fills that hole is gratitude.
Mm.
And gratitude begets abundance, real
Hmm.
abundance, like abundance of what actually matters. And when we're in that space, it frees us up to be in our purpose. If we are too busy just trying to survive, how can we truly be in our purpose?
We can't, and we can't even see like the path to get there.
Hmm.
Also, another thing we can talk about programming or institutions working for other people. If you are not asking for your worth, one, some of these systems are not going to give you what you're worth, but you're being pigeonholed to stay in a position um, because you are trying to survive. And it is very hard to like step into that purpose. But again, getting introspective and clear, really sitting with our thoughts and our mind and like our piggy bank, right? I think will like give us these like small tangible steps to figure out and find that way to get out of whatever situation. And it might not be now, right?
Hmm.
It can be something in the future, but the act of working on it right here and right now, I think is really powerful.
It's um it's beautiful and it's subversive. It's the work, you know. I'm so grateful that it's become very accessible, um, and that we have the time, you know, to even have these kind of conversations. Um, I want to add too that beyond societal programming, a lot of these things are kind of like the animal side of being human, right? Like if we know winter's ahead, we're gonna we're gonna hoard away our food or, whatever
Mm,
we're eating because yeah, that scarcity is there. But now we live in this like global collective society where like, yes, we should, I think practicing self-sufficiency or like being a homesteader or something like that is beautiful, but it's not accessible for every person. There's no way of getting around like having to all work together. So if we follow these rules that, yeah, they kind of go against some of our like more base human instincts, they will elevate us to the level
mhm.
where we can work collectively as a society and have the time and space to then be on a spiritual path that is sustainable, that is authentic, and that is rooted in love, non-harm, truth, you know, and all these beautiful principles. So that's why we do this. And yeah, it's fun to talk about, but let's apply it.
Mm, integrate it.
Exactly. So I bet this conversation about yoga philosophy was a lot more interesting than you thought it was going to be.
I mean, yes, it I am interested. I was interested because in my mind, when I think of yoga, I think of going to a yoga class. Yes, I could do it on my own. Okay, so I actually do have a question. I know like there are different paths and like
Mhm.
the poses and stuff are the asana portion, but let's say someone is like new to this, they want to practice it. How do you think? I mean, obviously, we have the yamas here and really diving into that and how you're showing up and really integrating it. But if they are already having a yoga practice, right, and they didn't realize that this was what it entailed as well, how do you think they can integrate that?
Yeah, so a few different things. One is like taking, okay, it can be hard to be a yoga teacher. I'll put it this way because like you are trying to tend to people's like mind, body, and spirits and get it all
Mm,
done in 1 hour and integrate the philosophy, like if it's a good class and this and that. So,
that's the reason
uh,
for retreats, right?
oh,
Why y'all
retreats
go?
are great. Yeah, and
Yeah.
teacher training is great. So, um, I'd say like one, finding teachers who are respectful of the cultural and philosophical roots of yoga and bring that into their classes. Like that's one way you do it. And that's going to give you tastes, like an hour at a time.
So
Um,
if I'm in a metropolitan area, how would I go about doing that?
oh, it might just take like
It might
um,
take time or just
some
going to different
searching.
classes. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to different classes, going to small studios,
Okay.
meaning like I don't want to say don't go to corporate studios because some of them have wonderful teachers that do integrate philosophy, but I'd say like, you know, you might find it more at a smaller space and find like teachers who are South Asian or Indian too, because it's part of their culture. It,
Mm, hmm.
so that's really good. Like obviously I'm white, but
Really, Lauren? You
yeah,
don't
really
say.
like really white too, just super pale. But like I do have an interest if I'm going to have the audacity to be teaching yoga to like understand its roots and where it comes from and to like teach it in a respectful way.
Mm,
Um, so that's one thing. Two is read. So I will share what I use for my yoga teacher training. So there are lots and lots and lots of different texts on the Yoga Sutras and like interpretations of it. I use this one called Living the Sutras, a guide to yoga wisdom beyond the mat, because it's very applicable. It presents the different sutras, gives a modern interpretation. I don't want to say a modern interpretation, but one that brings in modern references that we understand, and then has a reflection for each one as well, so that you can journal on it and actually like embody it. So I like that version. There are many different ones that are a lot deeper, more scholarly, that are going to flesh it out more. But I like that as a starting point for people who are like Western yoga practitioners because it is easy to understand.
hmm.
Um, there might be teachers who hold like different yoga philosophy workshops, so beyond like a yoga class. Um, and then yoga teacher training. So yoga teacher training. Um, yes, it's a way to become a yoga teacher and learn how to teach asana classes. But a really good yoga teacher training will like really spend a lot of time working on the philosophy. And that's really for me, that's where I've seen the most changes in students as I'm leading teacher training. Like, yes, I'll see their practice become cleaner, more integrated, more autonomous, for instance, but their life changes because of the philosophy and how they're applying it when they
Mm.
show up and try every single day. So for me, like I practice yoga every day. That doesn't mean I get on my mat every day, um, but I practice by how I make
Mm.
choices in every moment.
Because it's not just the asanas, that's just the one
Yeah,
part
exactly.
of a whole.
Exactly. So those are different ways to start diving into the philosophy. And I will offer um, my yoga teacher training for True Love Yoga. It's a 200-hour, starts on March 26th. And we have in-person options and fully online options. And when you're online, you actually are there live with everybody. We have a really amazing camera called an owl that like brings you right into the space. And we have you up
Ooh.
on a TV in the room too. So a lot of it is self-paced on Teachable, and then we have these live meetings together too. So if you enjoy this conversation and want to dive deeper, apply it to your life, know more, I'd love to have you. I think in person is pretty much full for the year, but online we have plenty of space. So if that interests you, reach out to me. I would love to have you. Um, and we go a lot more, we go in depth about yoga in general. Like we go into the history of yoga, we go into the philosophy. We spend a lot of time talking about philosophy, a lot of our lifetime. We go into like adapting asana for many, many different bodies, how to teach in a safe way that promotes longevity. We go into anti-racism yoga in yoga and yoga's roots in Egypt and Africa. Um,
Wow.
yeah, we have a really awesome teacher who comes in for that. We need to have her on the pod too, because she has
Yeah.
so much like awesome information. We go into what it takes to be trauma aware, what trauma is, and how to adapt your language and your teaching to be more sensitive toward people. So it's really life-changing. I always think of life like before yoga teacher training and after yoga teacher training. And so much of that is rooted in learning, applying, and embodying this philosophy.
So you can even like take this training and like, yes, have the expectation to be a teacher, but really just utilize it for your everyday life.
Oh, for sure. Some people have the intention of becoming a yoga teacher and then don't, and then the opposite can be true.
Hmm.
Um, but it's worthwhile no matter what. And like there is a teaching component, obviously, but a lot of times you learn how to do something well by teaching it. So
Yes.
even if you never like quote unquote teach, um, this process makes you a yoga teacher because yoga, again, isn't just leading a
Just the
class
asana. Yeah.
on a mat. It's integrated and immersive into an entire lifestyle and belief system. So, and I've told this to people before who don't end up teaching. They're like, I'm not using my teaching. I'm like, yes, you are by showing up every single day in your life for others in this way. By realizing who you truly are, you are teaching yoga because you're modeling it all the time. And when we talk about quote unquote like spirituality, like isn't this what we're talking about?
Hmm.
Realizing who we are.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So yeah, this is what informs so much of my work. I definitely spend now a lot of time talking about the feminine, not so much in the yoga teacher training, but like in my book and in this work I'm doing moving forward. But it is all rooted in this. And I'd love to talk about the niyamas, like the spiritual path, what that takes, next time we bring this subject up. So,
Yeah, I would love that. This has been very enlightening and informative, um, personally, right?
mhm.
And like letting me know that it's not just, and I know I keep saying it, but man, like I just always thought yoga was these like positions. That's it. And it's so much more, so much
Yeah.
more.
And like truthfully, and I don't want to like knock all practices that are solely asana based, but it's really appropriative to only take that and call it yoga,
Mm,
right? This whole system. Um, so I think if you're going to practice yoga, that at least being aware that it's so much more is really important.
thank you
Really,
so
really
much, Lauren.
important.
This is like I said, it's been very informative. I'm so glad you wanted to talk about this. This has been great.
Girl, I will talk about yoga all day, every day. Because essentially it's talking about life
Yes,
and how to live life. And
mm,
you know, we can all use direction for that. So
absolutely.
thank you, Patanjali, for laying this
Yes.
out for us many, many years ago. Um, so I have a little girl who needs to take a nap right now.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, sis, it's been great chatting with you, and
Yeah,
I know we will talk soon.
we will. Lots of love for you, girl. Have a
Love
great
ya.
day. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible episode. If you loved it, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and tell all your besties about us.
You can also connect with us on Instagram at Your Spiritual Besties Podcast. And be sure to say hello and share your thoughts about the episode. Love you, bestie. Talk soon.